I'd like to welcome you all to the fourth and final week of the 8th Annual Open Space Conference. This conference has been aimed to provide helpful resources and advice for members of municipal committees, as well as help facilitate connections through the use of our conference networking map. Funding for this event has been provided by the Massachusetts Working Forest Initiative in partnership with UMass Amherst and the Massachusetts Department of Conservation and Recreation. This year's conference series has been collaboratively organized by the North Quabbin Regional Landscape Partnership, the Mount Grace Land Conservation Trust, and the trustees of reservations. I am thrilled that you all have joined us today for our final webinar in the series, BioMap, the latest and greatest. Today, we will be exploring BioMap, a mapping tool from Mass Wildlife and the Nature Conservancy. We hope this presentation will help you gain a better understanding of this mapping tool and how your committee may be able to utilize it to help guide open space conservation planning in your communities and towns. To help us accomplish this, we are joined by two fantastic speakers, Alec Kaisand and Sarah Wasserman. Alec is a BioMap outreach specialist at Mass Wildlife, providing user support for the BioMap conservation planning tool. He has experience conducting spatial analysis, data management, remote sensing, GIS training, and printing services for conservation commissions, land trusts, municipalities, nonprofits, and academics throughout New England. Our second speaker is Sarah Wasserman, a fellow BioMap outreach specialist. In Vermont, Sarah has conducted research with the Vermont Limnology Lab and worked for the Vermont State Parks and consulted the Vermont Department of Environmental Conservation on environmental justice initiatives. In her home state of Massachusetts, she has worked for the trustees of reservations as a steward and nature educator and researched the Coastal Systems Group at UMass Dartmouth. And with that, I will now hand it over to Alec and Sarah.
Thank you, Isabel. Thank you, Julie, for having us. Just a quick confirmation we see this here, hopefully. All right. Well, hello, everyone. Thank you so much for having us, and we're excited to be here to speak to you. As we said, my name is Alec Kaisand. I'm joined by my colleague, Sarah Wasserman, and we are BioMap outreach specialists assisting with the outreach and user assistance for the new BioMap. So we are going to begin with some background information on the new BioMap if you're not familiar, and then do a short demonstration of the website and the interactive mapper, followed by some time for questions and discussions. So, as you all are aware, Massachusetts is teeming with life, and it's nearly 3 million acres of forests, 1,500 miles of coastline, vast networks of rivers and critical wetlands support a diverse natural ecosystem, which provides habitat for a wide variety of plants and animals. These natural systems offer vital ecological benefits. They filter our air, clean our water, provide food and economic opportunities, mitigate the detrimental effects of climate change, and provide us with recreation opportunities, all of which are really enriching our lives. However, despite the significant progress and conservation success by many people here today, our biodiversity is in crisis at the global, national, and state scale. According to the National Wildlife Federation report from 2018, a third of species in the US are vulnerable, and 1 in 5 species are at high risk of extinction. Now, in Massachusetts, we have 432 species on the endangered species list, and threats to our biodiversity include such things as habitat loss, fragmentation, invasive species, and emerging diseases. And all of these are being compounded by climate change. And so we really want to and why we're here today is to introduce the new BioMap, the future of conservation in Massachusetts. As many of you are likely aware, Massachusetts has a long history of being a leader at development of groundbreaking conservation tools, starting with BioMap in 2001, Living Waters in 2003, and BioMap 2 in 2010. Over the years, these products have provided a framework of protection and stewardship of lands and waters, critical for biodiversity conservation. And it's been heavily utilized by land trusts, state agencies, municipalities, and others, being considered a trusted and credible source of information. BioMap is the result of an ongoing collaboration between Mass Wildlife and the Massachusetts chapter of the Nature Conservancy, with similar missions, goals, and science-based approaches to conservation. Mass Wildlife and TNC are natural partners to produce and maintain BioMap. And with this latest iteration of BioMap, we go even further than we've had in the past. We're going to go into all the specifics today, but we really see BioMap as more than a map. See it as a map, a tool, and a vision for the people of the Commonwealth to come together and strategically protect, manage, and restore lands and waters that are most important for conservation biodiversity in Massachusetts now and into the future. So as with BioMap 2, conservation targets are grouped into these two main elements, core habitat and critical natural landscape, which you can see here on the map. Now, core habitat identifies areas that are critical for long-term persistence of rare species and a wide diversity of resilient ecosystems. Critical natural landscapes identifies large landscapes and habitat buffers that enhance resiliency, maintain connectivity, and support ecological processes. Together, core habitat and critical natural landscapes make up 2.4 million acres in the Commonwealth, and currently 44% of which is protected. Over 90% of BioMap 2 is included in this iteration of BioMap. However, there are some shifts in areas within the core and CNL components. Some of BioMap 2 areas have been removed due to things like new development, and new iterations of the new iteration of BioMap includes new areas from new data or new methodologies that were used. So we'll take a deeper dive into the components in just a little bit, but some familiar ones from BioMap 2 you might be familiar with, looking at the aquatic forest, rare species cores, and these landscape blocks, as well as wetland buffers or coastal adaptation areas. And we've updated all these data layers with the latest information on species and habitats, as well as enhanced some of the components such as aquatic core with new methodologies. This iteration also includes a new local and regional components, which Sarah will introduce in just a bit. And also the new interactive BioMap website includes numerous resources such as story maps to walk the user through what BioMap is, the different components and pieces of it, and how to use it. Additionally, it includes fact sheets to help users understand the data, the methodologies, and conservation strategies for each component. And these are really key when looking at how to describe the type of data that is in your community. Again, we'll go over those in just a little bit to look at some examples. I'm going to hand it over to Sarah to take up the local habitats.
Thanks, Alec. Happy to be here today. Talk a little bit about these local habitats. They are one of the key innovations incorporated into BioMap as a new feature. This is based on feedback that's been heard over the years since BioMap 2, that the tool wasn't as relevant to every city and town as it could be. Almost every town has core and or critical natural landscape, but our municipalities are very different from one another across the state. So the amount of habitat varies significantly among them. This makes us very excited to unveil this new municipal level data. And I'll show the first example. This map demonstrates the landscape blocks, which are a statewide component of critical natural landscape. Landscape blocks identify large, intact mosaics of forest, wetland, and freshwater habitat. These areas support wide-ranging species like moose and black bear, and also the resilience and abundance of many wildlife and plant species. Landscape blocks, as we can see from this map, are more abundant in some parts of the state than others, and many states and towns don't have any. So we added a local version of landscape blocks called local landscapes, which we can now see in light green. And these are the most intact natural landscapes in each city and town. These local components make BioMap relevant and applicable for many more communities. And we can look at this concept from the perspective of a single town. We chose the town of Stoughton as a good example. As we can see, BioMap identifies about 6% of Stoughton as core habitat and critical natural landscape in the dark, light, and green. These are priorities from a statewide perspective. Also to note, neighboring Avon here is actually the only town in the state with no core or critical natural landscape. However, when we add the local components, which now appear in purple, about 20% more of Stoughton now has habitat prioritized to inform municipal decisions. And we can see a similar pattern for Avon, which before had no statewide core habitat or critical natural landscape, but now has a good amount highlighted as a local component. So it's easy to see how every town now has a more complete understanding of the important habitats within their boundaries. It's important to note that the local data is not meant to replace the statewide data. It complements and adds to it, and it's important to use these together. Continuing with the local components, when you use the data on the map, as Alec will demonstrate in just a few moments, they will be unpacked as specific habitat types like local landscapes, wetlands, and rare species habitats. As you take environmental inventory of your town, these local layers add additional nuance and specificity. Take a minute to note that we have received questions in the past couple months since we launched in November on the methods that define these local components. These were not from local data sources, but rather derived from statewide data sets, field data and/or modeled data, scaled and prioritized from the municipal perspective. So, for example, the local wetlands use the same resilience and integrity data as the statewide wetland core, but they've been analyzed to identify the most important wetlands within each city and town. And given that this audience is particularly interested in protecting open space, we wanted to include this visual of what the protected open space layer adds to BioMap. I will note that it's not visualized in this image. Assessors' parcels are also now available on the map, and Alec will show this during the demo. But we can see here the visual power of the protected open space overlay with BioMap. This visual demonstrates where work has already been done and where more work can happen in the future. Towns are given the liberty to choose how they want to create maps for their open space and recreation plans. We just wanted to take a moment and highlight the role that BioMap can play in creating these. On the left is an example that we created for the town of Westboro, which is where our office is, of how BioMap, especially with the new local data additions, is a helpful and illustrative data set to use in OSRP mapping. The updated data is an exciting opportunity for towns to both know more and present more information than before. I will take a brief moment to mention the inclusion of regional connectivity data, which is on the other end of the scale, identifying habitats that make a significant contribution to conservation at scales larger than Massachusetts. As you can see in this image here, this is the tulip tree. A recent study showed that tree populations in the eastern United States are moving north and west at approximately 10 miles a decade in response to climate change. And the tulip tree is one such species that is projected to shift its range significantly northward through Massachusetts. BioMap now includes regional connectivity data that identifies places that support these large-scale range shifts. While not pictured here, BioMap also identifies important habitats for rare species that are highly vulnerable at regional, national, or even global scales. And I will hand it back over to Alec.
Thanks, Sarah. So at this point, we want to take a quick moment to highlight the difference between BioMap and another map or data set that you might be familiar with through the Natural Heritage Atlas, known as Priority Habitat. Priority Habitat is codified under the Massachusetts Endangered Species Act and is a regulatory screening tool to allow the Natural Heritage and Endangered Species Program to review projects or activities for impacts to state-listed species. This is different from BioMap, which is a non-regulatory and fundamentally is a tool to plan and prioritize conservation actions. So we do see that as a tool, and through this BioMap interactive mapper, which we will show in just a little bit, users can customize the data to meet their interests and needs. So for example, filtering to specific components, if you were just interested in aquatic and wetland components, or selecting data that is most relevant at a local or statewide scale or that regional scale. The map also includes an exciting summary report tool that enables users to derive information and summary statistics for an area of interest. And I'll show that in just a little bit. As well as with BioMap 2, the data are also downloadable for use in other analyses, and they're available in MassMapper as well. BioMap as a tool supports a wide variety of conservation strategies. Land protection is an essential such strategy. It allows municipalities, land trusts, and agencies to stop habitat loss and fragmentation, ultimately preventing the loss of biodiversity. BioMap helps practitioners focus conservation funding and efforts on critically important habitats that are either partially or entirely unprotected, leading to long-term legal protection and habitat resilience. Now, while land protection is essential, it is often not enough. Over 40% of rare and declining species in Massachusetts require active management of their habitats. And therefore, habitat restoration and management are now key elements of the Commonwealth's BioMap conservation strategy. So BioMap now includes the Habitat Restoration Resource Center, which will provide our conservation partners with recommendations and resources for stewardship actions that promote habitat resilience, restore ecological processes, and prepare for, recover from, and adapt to climate change. In these resources, it provides guidance to land managers on restoration and management priorities and site planning. It includes fact sheets that have information on different upland, wetland, and aquatic habitat types in Massachusetts, on specific practices such as prescribed fire, mowing and mulching, and invasive plant control, as well as resources for technical assistance and potential funding opportunities for specifically restoration and habitat management. And we'll show these in just a little bit, but I'm going to turn it back over to Sarah.
Another key innovation for this new BioMap is the deliberate addition of climate resilience data. For example, in this map of the Nature Conservancy's climate resilience analysis, the green areas identify places that allow species to move to suitable habitat in response to changes in temperature and precipitation. This data has now been built into 3 different components: the wetland core, the forest core, and the landscape blocks. Similarly, the Mass Wildlife Fisheries team identified freshwater systems that allow species to persist and thrive in the context of climate change. This includes climate change refugia, which are rivers that support cold water fish as water temperatures rise, including the iconic native brook trout. BioMap will continue to support conservation planning and funding, informing millions of conservation dollars each year. This not only makes sense from a conservation perspective, but it provides a high return on investment for our conservation dollars, because BioMap habitats are designed to stand the test of time and support biodiversity and resilience now and long into the future. We have 2 examples here of many excellent ones. One is the Essex County Greenbelt, their rigorous land prioritization process, and the Mount Grace and North Quabbin Regional Landscape Partnerships assessment of resilience, biodiversity, and other values. State agencies are also using BioMap in similar ways. I'm sure many of you are familiar with the DCS grants as pictured here, their website, and they use BioMap to guide that funding as well, and will continue to. As we know, many of the best conservation projects are collaborations among multiple organizations and agencies. We've heard that BioMap is a key tool in bringing people together and fostering robust partnerships. BioMap envisions a future in which the people of the Commonwealth invest in the strategic protection and stewardship of the lands and waters that are most important for conserving biodiversity. In this future, these vital natural systems continue to protect us against the damaging effects of climate change. They continue to provide clean air, clean water, employment opportunities, and beautiful spaces for recreation. They continue to ensure that all Massachusetts residents have access to nature and enjoy the benefits of our rich natural heritage. With BioMap, we can protect our extraordinary biodiversity and vibrant quality of life now and for future generations. I'll take a moment to note that BioMap would not have been possible without the financial support from EEA, DFG, Mass Wildlife, the Nature Conservancy, and numerous donors. The development of the nuts and bolts of BioMap were a true team effort involving numerous people from multiple organizations listed here, and we're very grateful for all of their hard work. I know that was a lot of information. We want to make BioMap as useful as possible to as many people as possible. So we will be doing more tutorials and webinars in the coming months to provide technical assistance. Additionally, we're available for one-to-one consultation meetings, so please feel free to contact us with any questions or requests. Remember, BioMap is now a living product, which will allow us to add more content easily over time. We hope that you will use BioMap, and please don't hesitate to give us your feedback. I think we have an email as well that should come up, or it'll be put in the chat. There we go. We're going to take a moment to pause before the demo to ask a few questions via a poll that will help us create BioMap resources in the coming months. So just take a few minutes to answer these questions, and then we will proceed on to the demonstration.
Give everyone another 30 seconds or so before we close out the poll. So if you haven't submitted your answer yet, please take a moment to do so now. All right, we're going to close out today's poll and share the results.
Great. It's really great to see both some folks who are experienced with BioMap perhaps, but also people who are new to BioMap. We're really hoping to, bring BioMap to new audiences. So this is really encouraging. It's great to see a variety of how people are interacting with BioMap, and also a variety of how people plan to use it. So this is all really encouraging. And thank you for taking the time to answer those.
Yes, thank you so much. And it's helpful, help us tailor the demo a little bit, since we have some new users and some people that are hoping to utilize the BioMap interactive mapper specifically. We wanted to take some time to go through the website resources and do a demo on the mapper itself. So let's make sure we still see, do we see my screen now? Hopefully we see the homepage for BioMap. Okay, great. So this is the homepage. If you go to mass.gov/biomap, or this link here, bring you to the homepage that you see here. And it is now this new interactive hub website. So it has quite a lot of resources, as we mentioned. We're just going to quickly go through some of them. So the landing page here that you see has these 4 tabs at the top. And then as we scroll through, we're going to have some different buttons to go through. In here, there are those additional story maps that are going to help users understand the information, as well as if you're doing outreach to community members, a good resource for you to help explain why this is important or why it's a helpful resource. And then if we continue to scroll down, you'll see the embedded interactive mapper. So you can use it in this homepage here, or you can scroll down and hit the view full screen map button, or in this top interactive map tab, and it'll open up a new tab for you to view it full screen, which I'll get to in just a few minutes. If we continue to scroll down, we'll see a few more buttons. The data download and resources. This is an important area. If we were to click on that, it'll open up this window. This is where you can go to the MassGIS website to download the data, as well as find those fact sheets for each individual component, or additional links and resources from Mass Wildlife, Nature Conservancy, and mass.gov. Additionally, I'm sure we're going to get this question. Just to get ahead of it, the technical report is being developed and is coming soon, and this is where you'll find it, just on this data downloads. But we are getting very close to releasing it, hopefully, so just some patience with that. Back on the main page here, the Habitat Restoration Resource Center can be, you can access it with this button or on the top tab, and we'll get to it in just a second. The Connect with Us button here, we are doing a lot of these presentations, and as Sarah said, we want to make this really accessible and usable for every type of user, and so getting feedback is really important for us. You can go in here and just submit a quick experience and about how it's going, or any questions or issues that you might be having. So please do feel free to reach out to us via email or using this feedback area as well. And then if you want to support endangered species conservation or learn more about the Natural Heritage and Endangered Species Program, you can go to this link here. So the quick overview of the homepage there. If we go to BioMap components, this is going to break down those individual components of core habitat, CNL, and local and regional components. So if we were to click on one of these buttons, it'll open up the story map that's going to go through and show you some pictures and some more description on what these individual components are. And you can jump to each one from here. I'm not going to spend too much time on that one. And also, if we go back to that main page, you can scroll down and go to the fact sheets that are available here as well. So for instance, if you're interested in learning more about how the rare species core layer was created, click on this button and it'll open up this rare species core fact sheet. What you'll find in here is a quick at-a-glance description of some core summary statistics, important methodologies on both the statewide, local, and regional versions of this, and then conservation strategies for this specific component. So all these fact sheets are really helpful in understanding what went into making these layers and why it's important for, why it would be important to have this type of component in your area. So then if we wanted to see the Habitat Restoration Resource Center, we can click on this link here, and it'll bring us to this web page. And it has quite a lot of resources here. So a story map on why restoration and management is essential. So again, if you're doing outreach or wanting to understand it a little bit more, you can go through and understand some key elements and importance of why restoration and habitat management is important for us. And then the meat of it is going to be this management recommendations and priority and planning area. And then further down, you have the Get Technical Support and Learn About Funding button. This will help for additional resources if you're looking for some assistance with habitat restoration and management. If we go to the recommendations, as I said, it's broken down into upland, wetland, and aquatic habitats, and has all these individual fact sheets for the different habitat types. Some are not ready yet, so they'll have that coming soon button there, but they are just got an update this morning, almost finished with all of them. So stay tuned with us. But if you're interested in, say, vernal pools, as you have in your community, you can click on this button and it'll bring you to the mass.gov website. And you can see habitat descriptions, some threats to it, as well as management recommendations. So a really important resource for users that are interested in restoration and management. So quick overview of the website and resources. But I'm sure a lot of you are ready to see the mapper. I will say, although we're going over all this information today, there is a story map, how to use BioMap. If you want to show other users or understand a little bit more about how to use the interactive mapper or want to teach someone, this is a great resource to go over what we're going to talk about today. But if we were to click on that full screen button, and it's going to open up the interactive mapper into this tab here. Now, it's maybe you're familiar with ArcGIS Online, other maps that may look like this, so it functions very similarly. They'll start in this statewide view, and you have a lot of features around here. So we'll go through those. We have a legend that you see here, which you can collapse or open up. We have a zoom in, zoom out button, which you can use, or you can use a mouse if you're using a mouse. The home button is going to bring us to this default view of the statewide. And then this button here is My Location. That's going to show exactly where you are in the map. So if you are using a cell phone, for instance, which it does work on smartphones, all of the hub site and this interactive mapper does work on your phone, and you wanted to be out in the field, you can turn on this button and it will show you exactly where you are in the map. Additionally, we have base map gallery. So if you wanted to change it to, say, ortho imagery and see the difference with that imagery, you can change the base map here. We can select different layers by clicking this button. And right now there's a few layers selected, and we're going to go through those in just a second. And then also, if you want to search something, you can search an area like, say, Westboro, and it'll zoom directly to that. So you can see I searched it and hit enter, and it's going to show this outline color. And that's showing us what we're selected. And this pop-up window showed up here. That window was giving us some attribute information about the polygon or the area that we just chose. And all of these are going to be selectable. So if we wanted to see what this core habitat is, we can click on that, and it's going to give us some attribute information or a link to go learn more about that. So as you can see, there's some different versions of all the data here. The BioMap elements is going to be this kind of dissolved version of the 2 core habitat and critical natural landscapes in the simple green colors. There's also this statewide overview that's only visible from that statewide view. And you can see when you zoom back out, that becomes black and others become grayed out or not visible. That's because the layers are scale dependent. So if something is grayed out and you're not able to see it, make sure you zoom in or zoom out far enough for that to be visible. And then you can see that. You can change what that looks like if you wanted to set a different visibility range. You can't change what's already there, but you can make it more or less, if you wanted to only see it really far out, you can change that for yourself here. You can also change the transparency, disable those pop-ups, or change the drawing order if you wanted to move this up or down in the visibility of the map. So you do have some ability to change those things for it. But if we wanted to, for instance, let's go back to Westboro. If we wanted to see, right now we're seeing just the core habitat and critical natural landscapes. If we wanted to see the components of each of those, we can click on those. You can see they're added to that legend. But they're not visible still on the map. And that's because this one on top of it is hiding it. So we just have to make sure we turn that off so you can see what's underneath it, because there's going to be that overlap. And so now you can see all the individual components and the great colors that go along with it. If you zoom in and want to see, click on one of these, and there's multiple polygons that are on top of each other, the pop-up windows are going to have one of and the number that is there. And it allows you to click on these arrows, previous feature or next feature, to go back and forth between those pop-up windows. This is important for understanding the attribute information within these polygons. So for instance, wetland core or aquatic cores have these, the selected cores derived by the following inputs. So why was it considered a wetland core? So for instance, this one had a priority natural community in it, and why it's derived as a wetland core. So some additional information in those attributes is important to take a look at. And then if we wanted to, let's turn this on, see the local landscape, the local components. So again, just summarizing with the BioMap elements, as Sarah said, we want to make sure we're using it with that statewide data. And it's just easier, you can do it with all the colors, but it might be a little busy. So it is somewhat helpful here. But you can see it really adds quite a lot of data in Westboro and in a lot of municipalities. And there is overlap between the statewide and the local data. So if you wanted to see what's underneath it, you could change the transparency and just bring that down and see, oh, well, what is this core habitat made of in terms of local components? You can see just kind of that difference as you're cycling through. So that can be really helpful when you're examining a specific property or looking at some information more specifically there. Make sure to turn it back though if you want to see it. And then if we wanted to take a look at protected open space, we can turn that layer on, and those polygons are also going to be clickable. Oops, let's turn. So we don't have so many. So you can see Cedar Swamp is the polygon for that. It has all that attribute information straight from MassGIS website. And same thing with the assessor's parcel. So if we turn that on, it's going to show in this pink color, and they are clickable as well to give some of that information. This is really important if you are trying to look at overlay in certain properties or understanding where BioMap information or data is located on a certain property. And this is also helpful when running the summary report tool, which is this button here. Now I will preface it, we are experiencing some server issues right now. So right now this one search feature is not working as the story map, the how to use BioMap story map explains. So that one little caveat, usually you could search Westboro and it would give you the town, but right now it's searching the whole US. So that's just one slight issue that we're working on. But in the meantime, there is also this draw feature. So you can, oops, that's not the right one. So if we wanted to get a summary report tool for a certain area, usually we could search a full town, or we could draw a certain polygon or a certain area. So if we go to the draw button here and select the polygon, say we wanted to, let's turn on the parcels, say we wanted to get information for one specific parcel or one specific open space land. We could use that, make sure we're on the right thing. We can use that draw polygon, and clicking, you can see it's giving me prompts and I can draw a certain area. I'm just going to go quickly to generalize it and double click to finish it. And now it's going to run a report or summary statistics for that polygon that I just drew. If we hit report, it's going to start running, and it'll give you some information here. You can look at it in individual components and see, okay, what's made up in there, and it'll show you what's specifically in that area, or you can print the button, hit the print button here, and it'll open up a PDF version for you. Now, in the meantime, for the full, as we're talking about open space plans, if you wanted to run this for an entire town, what you can do right now is using this select button, select by rectangle, and then just draw a small rectangle within that polygon of your town. It's going to select the whole town layer, and then you can run a report for your entire town. So just that one small step right now as we're fixing the place search to get an entire town summary report. It works the same, it gives the same information, just a slightly different mechanism of doing it. So again, we can go in through this and say, oh, I want to see, where is this, and click it, and it's showing us where that core habitat ID is. Or if we were to hit print, we can choose the size and decide what size we're gonna print this for. Hit that print button, and it's gonna open up a PDF version. It's gonna create a map for you, and this map is going to be the view that you see right before you hit this print button. So if you want certain layers to be visible, or you don't want them to be visible, or if you want to zoom in or out, or however you want that map to look, make sure it's ready to go before you hit that print button. And once you do, it's going to show you this PDF, and you can change the title of it, date, all this information here. The map will be created for you. You can add some different comments, and it's going to give you some summary statistics about what is found in that area of interest. So these are helpful to add to maybe some reports that you have, or include in additional analyses to just help you understand what information is there in your area of interest. So I know that was a lot of information and we went through very quickly. I'm going to pause just for a second here, as I know there's a lot of questions coming in, and we can dive back into the mapper or show you some things if we have specific questions about that. But that is a quick overview of the new BioMap hub site and interactive mapper. And yeah, we'll take some questions and go from there.
Thank you, Alec and Sarah. This was phenomenal, and we do have tons of questions coming in. I quickly want to remind everyone we'll be reading questions from the chat, so if you haven't done so yet, please feel free to submit one now. Also, please feel free to raise your hand, and we will call on you with your hand raised, and you can unmute and ask your question. To start us off, I'll take a question from the chat. Are there any recommended OSRP new BioMap maps available now for every town?
Good question. So with the new BioMap, so might be familiar with, if you have an old OSRP and there's a BioMap 2 PDF in there, those town reports that you may be familiar with, those took some time after the new release to be created. So we haven't created those at this time. We have the summary report tool to help in the meantime. But we are looking at making individual descriptions or smaller descriptions to go along with that summary report. So we don't have currently new BioMap maps, but if you can go through and utilize the summary report tool to make a map, or do something like ArcGIS Online or ArcGIS Desktop to make one of those maps, that would be the best way to do that right now.
I'll also note that a lot of the information that was in those BioMap 2 town reports, you can find on the hub site in those fact sheets.
Mm-hmm.
Awesome. And I see we have someone with our hand raised. Sarah Freeman, would you like to unmute and ask your question?
Sure, thank you. Hi, everyone. This is a lot of info, and I may have missed something, but do you all have a way to do scenarios, like if there's a historic park with a 7-acre paved parking lot, can you figure out what would be the potential if that parking lot were depaved or something like that in terms of habitat value?
At the moment, that BioMap is more of a planning tool for conservation on lands that are, populated with habitat such as forests or rivers and lakes, etc. as Alec mentioned, you do have the ability to zoom into certain areas. So if you have that paved area that's next, to maybe a forest, you could draw a polygon just in that area and maybe show that contrast. But at the moment, you wouldn't be able to visualize something that is not currently part of the data.
But if it were to be changed in the future, now that it is live and on the website, the idea is to be able to update it more regularly. And so as things like protected space or land use change over time, the BioMap data can be altered that way. But we don't have a way of kind of predicting that value just at this time. Yeah.
Thank you.
Awesome. And then I'm seeing there are a couple questions about layers. So do you have a layer for invasive species? And also, do you have a layer showing carbon sequestration?
Good questions. We don't currently. We are looking at additional analyses such as carbon sequestration. I will say with the TNC Resilient Land Mapper tool, that is a really good resource for understanding carbon sequestration in the Commonwealth. So that, which isn't built directly into BioMap, it is a really helpful tool. So if you are looking for something right now, that's a good tool for you to utilize. In terms of invasive species, not specifically in BioMap, but in things like Mass Mapper, where you can add in other layers such as natural communities or priority habitats or cold water fisheries, things like that, you can see that overlay of other data sets from AskGIS or other resources, but we don't currently have any of those in here.
And then I'll also just sneak in there, I think we have a request asking about a vernal pool layer. Is that something you're able to see?
So we
Yes.
do have,
Oh,
yeah, go
sorry.
ahead. No, please.
I was just going to, probably say what also Alec was going to say. We have a vernal pool core as part of the core habitat components. It's different than the certified vernal pools that you find on Mass Mapper because BioMap is not designed in the same regulatory capacity.
And then this question might be good for people who have not yet used BioMap in their open space committees. How would you recommend a volunteer on an open space committee start using BioMap?
Good question.
Yeah, great question. Well, attending this is definitely a great first step. And we are available to, continue answering questions and meet with people who are interested or maybe have specific questions about your town and want to work through the data in that one-on-one format. We're happy to provide that. So don't hesitate to reach out. And the hub site as well has those walkthrough materials via the story maps if you wanted to consult those too.
Awesome. And then it looks like we have a question. Can we get to landowner information in, will we be able to see individual reports for each community identifying species in each habitat area as we had in BioMap 2? Or can we get this info by clicking on a habitat area on the MPA, on the map?
Yes, so this is a difference from the BioMap 2. The species occurrence on rare species data is no longer specifically built into BioMap, as it's just through the Natural Heritage Endangered Species Program that information can be found. So there is the rare species viewer that shows on a town basis what individual species are within each area. And you can also do a data request from the Natural Heritage Endangered Species Program if you have specific questions about, say one property that you wanted to get information from. But that is a shift with the new BioMap is changing how that information is given to the public. And just as it is still available, we're not, it's just another way of getting to it, just a difference in the new BioMap.
And then quickly, before I bounce to someone who has their hand raised, I see a few people have requested for you to repeat the recommendation about how to access a layer showing carbon sequestration.
Oh, sure. I can put the link in as well. It's for the TNC Resilient Land Mapping tool. It is separate from Mass Wildlife and on the TNC website. I can post a link in just a second there.
It looks like it's already been posted in the
good.
chat.
I'm way behind on the chat.
Yes, by Andy. Thanks, Andy.
Thank you, Andy. Yes.
I also just do want to let participants know we will not be able to get to everyone's questions today, but we are storing them and we will be able to help get you these questions answered, and we'll reach out to our presenters afterwards to make sure that we can answer all your questions. We just have a limited time period today. So I would like to now call on Gwen to unmute and ask her question.
Two questions, if I may. One that I put in the chat about the accessibility of any materials, fact sheets, or anything in other languages than English. And my other question is whether, Sarah Wasserman, you could say more about how the maps relate to regulatory standards, particularly for like protected habitat, the PHSP, whatever, the thing that, the criterion that comes up on DCR grant applications, if you know what I mean, where you need to notify them if the area you're working on is a protected area. Thanks.
Well, I guess I can answer the second question first, because that one is now most present on my mind. So BioMap, as we gave a bit of a disclaimer before, but I can definitely elaborate, is not a regulatory tool, not designed in the same way that the natural heritage priority habitat and estimated habitat is designed. Those data sets are not on the BioMap interactive mapper either. So BioMap goes beyond what is mandated by the state in terms of what it includes regarding, priority habitat and different species. If you would like to compare those, Mass Mapper has both the BioMap data and the PRI-HAB and estimated habitat available to visualize. And I think I might need a reminder of the first question. I apologize.
First question was whether the information is in other languages other than English.
Oh, yes.
It is currently only in English. But
that's a great question.
Yeah, great question, and something that we certainly will take back to our team and
yes.
Work
Accessibility is definitely a priority, and we've talked about language before, and as we continue to work on expanding access to BioMap, that's definitely on our list. So thanks for bringing that up.
Yeah, I mean, obviously it could be infinite, but something like fact sheets that people could use with educational, with kids in schools and such like would be super, and with community members.
Absolutely.
We agree. Thanks for mentioning that.
All right, and I will now go into a chat question. Is there a mechanism for collecting the data upon which BioMap is based? Are there grants for this data collection?
Good question. So BioMap data is derived from the Natural Heritage Atlas. So data submitted through them is where species occurrence or stuff like that is information is derived from, as well as stuff like the protected open space layer that's updated by MassGIS and all the other layers. So still through that natural heritage database is the way to submit information. I'm not sure about funding for data collection, and I don't want to speak incorrectly about that, but we can get back to you on that question.
Awesome. And I now see Janice has their hand raised. Janice, if you want to unmute and ask your question.
Hi, I don't know if there's more than one Janice or not, but
sorry, Janice Stone, yes.
Okay, yes, good. So I was just wondering, when I use Mass Mapper, every time I open it, I have to start all over again, adding the layers that I want. And I'm wondering if there's a way that I can continue to work on this, maybe through the BioMap site, where I don't lose what I've already been working on and have to start all over each time.
It does when you reopen. So say you are playing around with it and then close it out. If you were to reopen that interactive mapper, it will give you a prompt that says, do you want to restore the version that you left off of?
Great.
And it should get back to it. The only thing that probably won't is that running the report. You may have to run that report and make that PDF mapper again. The layers and the extent and all the information that was there before should come back to the way it was.
Great, thank you.
And then it looks like we have a question in the chat. What is the criteria for identifying permanently protected open space?
Yes, that is a question we get frequently. That layer is maintained by MassGIS, and to my understanding is updated on a rolling basis, I think is how I would describe that. And there is a contact that you can contact through MassGIS if you have an area that isn't appearing on that layer, but that to be permanently protected, or that has changed in one shape or form. Yeah, we are not in control of that layer, but we are happy to provide the contact through MassGIS to make those corrections.
Awesome. And then it looks like we have a couple questions about BioMap's interaction with Mass Mapper. One is specifically asking, how does BioMap interact with Mass Mapper? And then another is saying, So we have two interactive tools, MassMapper and BioMap. How would you characterize the best use for these tools?
It's a great question. And why we asked that in the poll is trying to understand how users are utilizing this data. It really is a personal preference, up to you. We're here to tell you about BioMap, so we showed you the BioMap mapper, but we know many people use MassMapper because you can include other data sets, especially for OSRPs that you're looking at. So it's really up to the user and what's more comfortable. There are things that, like in the BioMap mapper, where you can have those pop-up windows that MassMapper doesn't allow for. So there are some slight differences. You can print a map differently in MassMapper. So there's just some of these differences that we don't have all the time today to go through. But I would say if you're looking to overlay other data from MassGIS, use MassMapper, and the BioMap data is the same in MassMapper or on our interactive mapper. Or if you're looking to explore the data more specifically and really get into the polygons and the attribute information, the interactive mapper will give you some more of those abilities. So no, that wasn't an exact answer, but I hope that it clarifies a little bit.
Awesome. And then Bettina, would you like to unmute and ask your question?
Hi, yes, thank you so much for this opportunity. It's a phenomenal tool. Just wondering, how is rare and endangered species and other conservation values that are on private property, how does that data get entered into the system, and as well as golf courses?
Same question in terms of golf courses, you mean?
Yes, since they're privately owned usually, or sometimes they're municipal, but I'm just wondering, how do the scientists know whether or not there's a rare species on a piece of privately owned property or a golf course, for example?
Sure, yeah.
Yeah, great question. Information on the methodology behind some of these cores is on the fact sheets, but I'll also explain a bit here. A lot of BioMap was achieved through modeling and different, indices created, for example, by UMass Amherst, versus like on the, ground truthing from individual locations. So in terms of, I don't know exactly for private property, and, I don't want to speak incorrectly on that, but I would definitely point to the modeling. I would say it's more likely that those polygons appeared because of a model, or the scientific methodology that they applied versus visiting somebody's property, if that distinction is helpful. And Alec, if you wanted to add to that, feel free.
Yeah. So essentially it would be that the individual submits that data to endangered species program. So through that database, all this information is derived from people submitting that for us. So if it's a private land, we're not doing research on that. We're not going to have information unless that homeowner or someone on that property, whether they're supposed to be or not, submits that data to us and tells us, yes, there is a species here. So if someone has gone and done that, that's why it would be covered on something like PriHab or BioMap. But if that hasn't been submitted, we don't know. Right. So we're not, not going out there and, inspecting everyone's lands and doing it that way. But yeah, more information from the Natural Heritage, if you have more questions about that specifically.
Yeah. And in terms of golf, sorry.
Yeah, of course.
I was just going to mention, in terms of golf courses, I believe those are a part of the protected open space layer. So those would be submitted through that.
And I think with that, we have to wrap up our Q&A segment. Again, we are storing all the questions that we did not get to answer, and we will work with our presenters to help answer them and send some helpful resources in our follow-up emails to you all. But I would now like to transition us and announce the winner of today's raffle. Again, this week's prize is a pair of Knox Provision binoculars. And our winner today is, drumroll please, Jane Maloney. Jane, if you could privately message Julia Fitzpatrick with your email, she will reach out and we will get the necessary information to send these binoculars your way. So that's exciting. But with that, I would like to thank you all for participating and attending today's webinar, and a huge thank you to our fantastic speakers. As a reminder, the recording of this webinar can be found on the Mass Open Space website under the 2023 conference tab. More broadly, we want to thank you all for participating and helping make this year's 2023 Mass Open Space Conference a success. We greatly admire the work you all are doing to help protect, preserve, and restore natural environments across Massachusetts, and applaud the crucial role you all take as leaders, environmental activists, and land stewards in your communities. There's a short evaluation survey being posted in the chat, so please take a moment and fill it out. We always appreciate your feedback. And lastly, be sure to follow us on social media to stay up to date with the Open Space Network. Thank you all again, and we hope to see you at other open space events throughout the year.